Greetings, everybody. Welcome to 1 Degree of Scandalous with Cato Kalin.
Hi, me.
And Tom Zenner. Episode number 23 right here at Action Park Media. This is our 6th episode here. Feeling at home, loving it.
Great.
So far, so good.
Great stuff.
Having a lot of fun over here. Download and subscribe if you haven't. Go back and watch some of our previous episodes. You know, we hit all the scandals, Cato. We started this at the perfect time because there's sports now that you've never heard of or barely know of that have scandal.
Well, we featured walleye. Who would have thought there'd be a scandal with walleye? These guys
fishing.
have been indicted, the cheaters in the walleye in Ohio on Lake Erie. And you're not going to believe this next scandal. Okay, so walleye, you think, okay, what could there be another sport that's just sort of oblivious to anybody's mind? Well, you know, late night sometimes I go through maybe getting a turkey burger and it's 3 a.m. I'm going, oh, what's on? I check out ESPN 14 or whatever, and they have cornhole championships. You're not going to believe this. There's a cornhole.
No, I do believe
cornhole, a scandal.
A cheating scandal.
A cheating scandal. You know what cornhole is, by the way, right?
It's a fun game. It's fun. I like it.
I played in a cornhole championship, believe it or not. I was invited.
Why would we not believe that?
In
of course
Tampa,
we do.
Guess who invited me? Tampa, Florida.
Tony Dungy.
John Allstat. Do you know he played
of course,
fullback?
Fullback.
Of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Went to Purdue.
Mike Allstat.
Mike Allstat,
right. His son was a quarterback at Purdue. I think he's
Time out. He's got a son that's played college football already? Mike Allstat?
Or done, yeah. He's a quarterback.
No.
At Purdue, yeah. Find out. I'm pretty positive. And I met it was a huge charity event, but it was on the beach, and there were professional cornhole players. Folks, by the way, that's a lot of bars have it. It's a sack filled with raisin. A sack filled with raisin. Tom got excited when I said sack.
Griffin Allstat for Purdue.
Oh, yeah.
What's it?
Griffin Allstat.
I said that, Purdue. Right? Purdue, I said that. I know my stuff. Quarterback, correct?
Yes, quarterback.
All right, Cato Kalin.
Breaking news.
Okay. And you put it in the hole, the cornhole.
Cato, we know what the sport is. I mean, people play that, right?
So,
you toss it, the hole.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's on the tournament. You make
at hotels every now and then by the pool.
Yeah, 15 to 30,000 for tournaments. Well, now someone was been accused of having a lighter sack. You know that.
They boiled their sack, right?
Well, they made it lighter, but they had the judges say, no, this sack is fine. I don't know what you do. I don't know if you go to the sack and say cough, turn and cough. But the sacks were lighter, and they found out the people that were accusing them, their sacks were lighter than theirs. So, and the judge said they're going to come up with the something where everybody has to have the equal sack. Or something.
They need a commissioner. Okay, that's what they need.
I think they're getting publicity of.
Well, they get more publicity from this from something else.
Completely.
I think they're intentionally finding the cheating. Why not? We're all talking about it. By the way, you played in a tournament that Mike Allstat invited you to.
Right,
that were professionals were there.
Yeah.
Could you tell the difference between a pro cornhole player and just a really good amateur? No. I mean, are they that much better?
No, I was on fire. My team won. I think it's been playing sports. You kind of know how to. If you throw a football or a pitch, you know sort of how much velocity to put in any of your throws, and you can just the thing is if your sack is on the board, the tilted board with the hole before the hole, it's how to learn how to knock the sack into the hole.
Of course, right? Yeah. There's a little strategy involved too.
There's
sort of like shuffleboard. The drunker you are, probably the better you can play.
Oh, completely. Cornhole should be done drunk.
Yeah, the percentage of people that play cornhole that aren't at least buzzed is very, very low.
Probably better drunk.
There's scandal. Okay, so the scandal in that Michigan State game too. I mean, now these guys are they're going to get some criminal charges. That thing was just nasty. If you've played football in the past, you're just disgusted by that.
Yeah.
They keep talking about Michigan's tunnel. Like the tunnel didn't cause that. Okay, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teams have walked through that tunnel at the end of the game and not used their helmets as weapons.
Yeah,
that was just disgusting.
Do you notice that there's so much more violence lately in sports? I don't know. It's because it wasn't reported before, but constantly there's a violent acts going on. I'm like, what is going on?
I know it's supposed to be a release, right? We want to watch this and get away from the tensions of the real world. But if you want to blame anybody, just blame the media. They make everything worse, don't they? I worked in the media for so long, and I never felt that when I was in it, that we were that negative to society. But man, now it's unbelievable. I'm trying to think who's worse, politicians or the media. It's about even, right?
I think they work together, don't they?
Yeah, they're in cahoots.
I mean, it depends on what mainstream media or not. It just doesn't matter. But when I saw you today, you walk in, and the people watching the show, I'm going, Tom, you always got the best fashion. Always looking good.
It's not me,
Always
it's my
at the
wife.
leather. Well, she dresses you right.
She does a very good
I'm
job.
still in the Garanimals. So
Well, you've only been married 5 months, Cato. So at some point you learn, and it'll be very, very soon for you, or else, that you just do as you're told.
I did. You could actually be in a fashion show. And speaking of that, has Rihanna called you?
Yeah.
She what?
It's getting a little annoying, actually.
Well, you know that Johnny Depp is making his first public appearance at the. It's called I don't know if you know the Rihanna Savage X Fenty show.
Yeah.
I don't. You know that?
Yeah. Well, she's a billionaire because of that. I mean,
what is Fenty?
Well, she's got a makeup line. She's got a clothing line.
Is Fenty clothing, right?
She's a billionaire. It's unbelievable how these pop culture icons have become billionaires. Kendall Jenner. Well, I don't know if she is. Kylie, Kim. They're billionaires.
I'm blown away.
I bet Kris Jenner's secretly a billionaire too. Yet Kanye was a billionaire. Now P. Diddy became a billionaire. Jay-Z is a billionaire. LeBron James is a billionaire.
Our guest on our show is probably a billionaire.
Our guest coming up a little bit later in the show. I guarantee you he's a billionaire. That's a great tease. Yes. First time we've had a billionaire on this show. Too bad he wasn't here in person. We'd have him taking us shopping after this or something.
Like you said, it's security. For security reasons. We're going to have to probably, on our picture, draw a little mustache on it.
On a need-to-know basis?
Yes, a need-to-know basis. It's a top secret show, I think.
All right. So you ready to get into it?
Yeah.
We'll take a little break? Okay. All right. Hey, thanks for watching. We're going to take a quick little commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to have a special guest, so stay tuned.
We're going covert on this.
All right, Cato, I am excited for this next part of the show.
I told you it was going to be good.
Okay.
I told you it's going to be big.
So here's the deal. There are so many scandals that have happened. Some you know about, some you don't. Sometimes people that were in the middle of the juiciest and the best ones and the most interesting ones are under the radar sometimes. You're going to know who they are when we talk about them, but this is fascinating. We have our guest coming up right now. His name is James Covert, Jim Covert, friends that know him very well, like this guy over here.
I do.
A living legend. Let me just crank out some of the stuff that he's been involved in. He owned Honeywell, okay?
Yeah,
one of the owners of the security, he owned the security part of that. He was a Secret Service agent. His cousins are Dick Van Dyke and Jerry Van Dyke from Coach.
That explains why that explains why he's always tripping over an ottoman.
We'll get to the bottom of that. Hey, he's friends with Ron Rivera, the head coach of the Commanders in Washington.
Yep.
He used to work for the Dodgers. Let's bring him on. Bring him on.
My dear friend, everybody, this is Jim Covert. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing real well, thank you.
I'm so glad we're putting a picture up of you. He still looks the same. He's this handsome guy. He looks like he would be like a James Bond.
Yeah, like a true security legend. Hey, Jim, do you do Zoom? No, under the radar, baby.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, forget Zoom.
Can't
when
do
you
it.
owned a tech company, you don't mess around with Zoom.
Security. He's always in security. And speaking of security,
hey, Jim, what a pleasure. And I know you and Cato go way back. This is one of my first times talking to you. So first of all, thank you for joining us here on 1 Degree of Scandalous with Cato Kalin and Tom Zetter. By the way, did you know that Cato Kalin was involved in a scandal about almost 30 years ago? I don't know if you had heard anything about that. Just kidding.
That's where we first met.
yes.
Hey, okay, so I'm trying to figure out where to start. But how about you? Do you have a starting point?
I wouldn't go starting point, but what I'm going to bring up and let Jim kind of go free. Just roll with it, Jim, because there's so much great history to you. But before, and Tom and I were talking out in the show of all the scandals going on and this Paul Pelosi thing, and I wanted it from you to hear what your opinion is of how the cameras were turned off for Paul Pelosi attacked with a hammer by
a residential house in San Francisco.
Right, where the neighbors are saying there's always security, there's always cameras on. And of course, Speaker of the House Pelosi has her own detailed security. And you were security was it President Reagan, I believe, right?
Well, no, actually with Nixon, Ford, and Carter.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so you had three.
Okay, as a Secret Service agent.
As a Secret Service agent, Jim,
yes.
And then we'll get into your history. What is your opinion of what went wrong?
Well, the simple way to say that to you is go back to the Epstein thing and say, how did that happen in his prison cell?
Cameras off.
You know, people people don't do what they're supposed to do, you know?
Yeah, but what are the odds that the cameras are off and then something like that happens with Epstein? No one knows how
And the alarm.
You have to know when to strike. You have to know that the cameras aren't going to be on. So, did this seem fishy to you when you've heard the first details? Because your background is the highest levels of security,
right?
And then with the Secret Service protecting 3 presidents. So, did alarms go off in your mind, thinking, I got to know a little bit more about this one?
I mean, but once again, back to the Epstein thing, you know, I mean, how can you hear that story and not have the alarms go off? So it's the same thing here. You know, you can't help but say, how did that happen? You know, I mean, you would have expected who answered the door. You know, they haven't answered that question yet.
And so,
you know?
So you have been in the White House many times, and you know with the DOJ. Why would the camera footage, the cameras from the police, not be released? Why would they hold back on the public seeing this? What's the reason?
Well, it probably has to do with the future, exposure of this information in the courts. It's really very, very early in this, and we haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
I mean, to trust me, what you're hearing on the news, you haven't heard much of anything yet.
Well,
and I guarantee you they know much more than they're saying.
I'm not taking political sides, but I watched the Biden speech and all that. How can he possibly, when the gentleman supposedly, how does he know the guy's going, "Where's Nancy?" and he compares it to January 6th? Isn't he blaming? Isn't it? He doesn't even know the fact, or maybe he knows the facts, but come on, that's a stretch, and putting blame on this attack that has probably nothing to do.
I still wouldn't be surprised if we find out at some future date that this gentleman knew, the Pelosi's one way or the other. Knew something about their house and how to get in there. And, knew more information than we know.
The crazy thing when I heard his description when they were talking about this dude is he was a radical nudist or something. They talked about this new. What the hell does that even mean? A radical? You're just a moderate nudist, right?
Well,
you come in here half naked.
You must listen to Fox.
Yeah,
I hear every time they tell the story, they start out with he was a nudist.
I know. I can't believe. I tell people that when I was at the nudist camp, I'm 12 inches and I can never get my foot in the door. But seriously, Jim, I'm glad our podcast adds 10 inches. Hey, where are we going with this, Jim? No more dick jokes.
I know. Well, I always get caught in those.
And you know what? Paul Pelosi, he's having a rough last 2 months. The car accidents, the DUI. And by the way, Jim, they never told us who the passenger was in the car, in the Porsche. They never released that.
Jim will find out at the Secret Service Christmas party. He gets all the info.
Yeah, I was wondering. So once a Secret Service, you're always Secret Service, correct?
Well, yes, that's correct.
Hey, Jim, let me ask you this. When you were working with presidents and your job is to protect them, did you ever have a peaceful moment? Or were you just constantly under stress, wondering what the next threat could be, making sure nothing ever goes wrong, just feeling the weight of the responsibility that you had?
I would say that we had a lot of peaceful time. The Secret Service is one of those things where everything you know is only important when you know it or when you need to know it. And, they go to bed like everybody else every night and the house is still full of Secret Service, So, you're working,
if you're not on the clock.
You're working crossword puzzles in the middle of the night. And really very little is going on then.
Lot of brain power. And Secret Service has to be nonpartisan, right? Because it has to be because Trump has his stuff going on, a break-in, I guess, at Mar-a-Lago, and Biden has his Secret Service. So the Secret Service have got to, I don't know, you went through training, but I suppose that it's just treat everybody equal. You can't take sides, right?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you really can't. Certainly... there's enough stories out there of Secret Service guys who have been in trouble for one thing or another. But, generally, the Secret Service is the group that is the most untouched with unfortunate things. I mean, really, it's a very good core of people, and most of them are very good at keeping their mouths shut. And I've had 1 million people ask me to write a book or talk about things, but I just think it's inappropriate, and it's just not the thing I would do. You know?
Well, here, let's make it 1,000,001.
Yeah.
Look, we don't have to use real names. So how about, was there anything with Mixon or Gord? Or Kragan?
Yeah, he's I think that's Tom. I think that's Pig Latin.
Hey, without specifics
Yes.
though, without specifics, did you see some crazy shit?
Yes. I mean, yes, you see personal stuff. The stuff you see on the news is what everybody sees. But what they don't see is the personal life you spend with the first family. And I mean, frankly, they get to know you on that kind of personal basis, but you get to see the family, especially when they have children and things like that. And those are the things that I just think you have no business talking about, and I won't, so.
Well, I tell you what, I like I said to Tom, I'm a huge fan. And by the way, back in the day, did the Secret Service ever play softball against the FBI? And if they did, I hope you kicked their ass. The old song. Hey, we were talking about Tom was trying to get you to, release information. You become close to all the presidents you protect. Now, I remember a iconic photo, and I don't know if you're in this one, Jim, but there's a connection to you with a photo, one of the most famous photos of Richard Nixon with Elvis Presley. Are you
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, that day when Elvis came to the front gate of the White House, I ended up escorting him up to the office of the president.
Escorted Elvis?
Yes.
I wonder if that's in the new Elvis film, that scene. If they did, I didn't see the film yet.
What'd you talk to him about as you walked him up there?
Yeah.
He came in totally unannounced into the North to do was get a hold of the president's office and see if they even wanted to see him.
Huh.
And if they did, where they wanted to see him and so on.
Did he look like his? Oh, sorry.
So we, ultimately they said yes, they wanted to see him, and we escorted him up to the Oval Office, to have that meeting.
How does he show up unannounced? Does he think like, hey, I'm Elvis. I am going to go anywhere unannounced?
Yes.
Unannounced. He just did
Yes.
that?
That's how he did it.
Did you have to go through a complete? And I want to get more of what you guys talked about. But did you guys have to do a whole search on Elvis before he went into the office with Nixon?
Yeah, a lot of that I can't talk about. But,
Okay.
I mean, the answer is yes. He couldn't just walk in.
Well,
So
it's hard to miss him when some guy strolls in with a white sequin jumpsuit.
Yeah, exactly. That's the picture.
It's probably the easiest job
work at the
frisking
White
somebody,
House, there's a
though.
lot of people that come in weird ways.
Elvis started the whole bedazzled thing with
Yes.
the bedazzler. So, and from that relationship, I think there's a back history to you and Elvis. Is it because of that meeting?
No, I was when I was younger,
Yeah.
a lot younger. When I was 16, 17, I worked at Chess Records in Chicago as a rhythm guitarist, and I met his whole entourage and group. At that sorry to use that name.
Entourage.
But,
I told you
but
he's
it-
funny.
But
I wasn't trying to be, but I met that whole group there, and we performed together, in the studio, and I got to know them quite well. And I was a songwriter, and then doing some recordings. I worked on some of the songs for recording. Mostly lyrics, making lyrical changes to some of the music. But also, I know we're talking about Elvis, but, I also, interestingly enough, was the only guy, I think, in the Secret Service who ever performed live in the White House. And there's actually an article on record. You'd find an article about this by Helen Thomas, who was president of the press corps. But we had George Harrison
The
and
Beatles?
Brian Wilson.
Of the Beach Boys? Okay.
Yeah, they came in together to see Steve Ford in the White House, and I escorted him around. And then we went up to the East Room of the White House, and we started playing music. And interestingly enough, they, because I had been with the Shadows at Night in Chicago, or performed with them, and then performed with a lot of other groups. And we started talking about the music I had worked on, and of course their music. Now you would think that they wouldn't care about my music,
But
they did. They were quite familiar with it.
Wow.
And so we were in the East Room of the White House just making music. and then but they were going to perform, for the president that evening in the White House, and then I was invited to perform with them.
Wow.
And
I was going
so
to
I
ask,
ended up performing,
did
for the president and the first lady.
correct me if I'm wrong, did George Harrison, "My Sweet Ford," "Oh My Ford," yes or no?
Let's hope not.
I don't know, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, you had to
My
be the most
sweet
heavily armed backup guitar player in the history of rock music.
Yeah, that is an amazing story with the.
So really, that story is probably the most famous of my career.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, Tom, you know,
Helen Thomas wrote an article about that at the time.
yeah.
And
So Elvis, the film came out. So Elvis is sort of out there right now with,
Yes.
the film hitting, breaking records, and Austin Butler, the actor, becoming will be a megastar because of that.
Yes.
Some of the songs you said can you tell us some of the songs? Do you get royalties from those songs? And what were there any of the songs?
No.
Why?
No, I was an employee at Chess Records at the time.
Oh, wow. But you're writing lyrics. Now, how about
But that's not unusual. You go in to record music in the studio, and a lot of songs get written on the floor of the studio, or the lyrics get changed or the music gets changed while you're recording the music.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's not unusual.
It's like he's
the
had.
problem is we're talking about when I was 16 and 18, guys.
Your history though is like you lived enough for about 15 people's lifetimes.
Yeah, he's had like
stuff.
5 careers.
Yeah,
10
just
careers.
everything you've done, you've kind of hit gold and everything. Speaking of gold,
Well, my music, just to finish that up, for Dick and Jerry Van Dyke, their father's name was Cookie Lester Van Dyke, and he owned a nightclub in Danville, Illinois. And when they were already on the road and famous, we used to go perform over at his nightclub and so on.
Cookie's place.
And so their father is the one who got me the gig over at. He was a vaudevillian, and then went on to other things, but he arranged my gig over at Chess Records. So.
Wow. Man, that's really cool. What was Thanksgiving dinners like back then? Because you ended up with one of the most serious jobs you could possibly have, Secret Service agent,
right,
and then a CEO and a tech company. These are serious careers. And then you got Jerry Van Dyke, who was on Coach.
Yeah.
God, I loved him. The defensive coordinator from Minnesota State. And, of course, Dick Van Dyke was
signing autographs. When I used to do we see Dick Van Dyke. He has a line out the door. Dick Van Dyke is
Yes.
he's this guy, kind man. And I had a chance to meet him because I love him. And
Right.
How can you not love him? And he's still out there signing. I believe he's still alive signing autographs.
Yeah, he is.
Yep.
I mean, he's still living with his wife, and they're busy.
Did you think he was going to be a star? Did he seem like it? Like, this guy's got a lot of talent. He needs to go to Hollywood?
Well, in honesty, I didn't know. I knew Jerry a lot better than I knew Dick, because Dick was so much further along in his career already in Hollywood.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I knew him, but to tell you that I knew him well, that would not be
True.
a truthful statement. But I mean, of course, by the time I was a young guy, Dick was already very successful and already had the TV shows. So everybody knew he was going to be a star then. And of course, in Danville, Illinois, Dick Van Dyke is kind of everything to everybody.
So I'm gonna fast forward just a little bit. I want to ask you. I was telling the guys here at the studio. I said you have an involvement with Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings director, I believe writer also, and
right.
You have. I want to know how that whole thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. You have land in New Zealand, and they shot those Lord of the Rings on your land, your property. Am I speaking?
At that time? See, I mean, you're speeding through a lot of things. Yes, but I mean, the answer is that after I sold my assets, with Honeywell and so on, then I had a non-compete in the United States for 5 years. So I went to Australia and New Zealand and started purchasing companies, security companies, and turned them into the largest security company in Australia and New Zealand, a company called Signature Security. And so then in Queenstown, New Zealand, the South Island of New Zealand, I bought let's call it a ranchette or something, about 15 acres on the lake called Wakatupu in Queenstown.
What'd you call me?
And yeah, my next door neighbor was a guy by the name of Ivan Clark, a very famous artist, and I joined with Ivan in putting together this company and its program that we call the Lonely Dog. That's the name of it. And I invite all your listeners to look up on Google, Ivan Clark and the Lonely Dog. It's a very, very interesting story, and you'll see 150 pieces of artwork.
Wow.
And we all started that in a conversation on my ranch one day, and it's very famous now. But so Ivan putting together this presentation for the Lonely Dog for his studios, we started meeting with Richard Taylor, who is the president and CEO of Weta Studios. And Weta, did all of the studio work, for the Lord of the Rings and
correct,
so on.
Right.
And then I had a large kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of a ballroom in my building there. And we used to have very big parties there, show business parties in New Zealand. And Richard Taylor would come, and Peter Jackson would come, and all of those people that you would know,
That's amazing.
would come there.
Wow.
So without taking an hour to describe it to you, that's really what happened. And I lived there in New Zealand for 6 years.
What incredible! And I think Lonely Dog, there's a novel out now too.
Yeah, there's a book out on the Lonely Dog, and more importantly, coming up very, very quickly, a lot of people have heard about Van Gogh's, shows that are going around the country, called a full immersion, I think they call it, of the Van Gogh artwork.
Yeah, is he the guy? He's the artist that Mike Tyson bit, right? I'm kidding.
So at any rate, just so you know, Ivan and the Lonely Dog are going to be the second display of this immersion technology in the world. And there's 5 of the Van Gogh shows on the road right now. But right across from the entrance to Universal Studios in Orlando is what used to be a Nike headquarters building, which is right at the second being converted into the Lonely Dog immersion technology. And that'll open in December. And that whole show, will be going then. As you're aware, I'm coming to LA again here in a couple of weeks.
Well, I want to meet you for dinner.
Yeah, right. I'm going to tag along.
We're going to do that, and you're welcome to. And but there's going to be a number of producers and so on there, and we're actually having discussions about doing a Apple TV streaming series on the Lonely Dog. And so that's what we'll be discussing.
Great. I'm going to help you close the deal. I'm coming. Hey, by the way, Jim, you've had an amazing career, but add this to your resume. You got Stock Tip Dave fired up in there when you said Orlando. I thought he was in there sleeping, but then I saw him pop up. That's our producer. Good job.
We have Dave back there. He's an insane Orlando Magic fan, and he's going to really be crazy when he finds out they actually get into the NBA. Anyways.
Well, so the other thing is, just to carry on that story, we're leaving out the whole middle of my story, but the whole ending of the story is right now, and I'm here in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
Beautiful area.
And we are under construction right now with a building we call the Lonely Dog Cafe. And Ivan and I are opening the first Lonely Dog restaurant here in March of next year. We're under construction.
Wow.
Right now.
Congrats.
So the Lonely Dog story is a lot of things going on with it right now. Welcome everybody to look at the Lonely Dog on Google.
No, that's cool. Save a corner table for Cato.
Yeah, no, I love it. I you know what? Tom, before the show started, I told you the history, and Jim can go on and on with these stories. I mean, look at it, like you said, security, with working with Elvis, and I didn't even touch upon that he has a song, which I'm sure you've heard of, "Lonely, I'm So Lonely." That's Jim Covert. Am I correct? That's a song of yours?
You wrote that song, Jim? Uh-huh. You wrote that song?
No, I didn't, but I re-recorded it and released it.
So that's him when we hear that hit song?
on one of them.
Yeah, cool.
He's got the Jim Covert version. Tom, I know you want to get more into the scandal with the Pelosi and other stuff that's going on with Secret Service.
Sure.
Only because this is just really in my mind. I don't know why. There's some. I watched this. The Clint Eastwood was. I don't know how true it was.
Oh, In the Line of
Eastwood,
Fire.
In the Line of Fire, and
Yes.
and I think Jim. That's pretty. I think that's pretty much Secret Service. They're right on with stuff that happens there. Correct?
Yeah, that was. We had a guy in the Secret Service by the name of Bob Snow, and he was running the technical security division of the Secret Service, and he worked with that whole movie. I mean, not just him, but I mean his whole group worked on that movie.
Sure.
So they made it as factual as they could in the Line of Fire.
Really good cast. John Malkovich was in that.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, so that's their job to make sure that they stay consistent with what is accurate as far as protocol
Yeah.
for the Secret Service.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jim worked in Watergate during the Watergate era with Nixon too. That had to be some stressful times for Tricky Dick, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I should say for sure, that Cato knows this. I operated a very large company. I bought 172 different security companies, put them all together. That's where we got, companies like Honeywell Security in there and Protection One. Some of you'll know some of those companies. And we sold those companies ultimately to ADT, and we sold them for $1.4 billion. And I had 8,000 employees then. And one of my employees all that time, very great guy, was Tim McCarthy. And Tim was the agent who was shot, with Ronald Reagan. And then, he worked with me for years after that.
Wow.
He recovered. He didn't. He was the one who protected Reagan, but
Yes.
he recovered fully. And is he still okay today? Right?
Oh yeah, he's retired from another place now. But
He took the bullet for Reagan.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
Reagan got it.
So a number of people got shot that day. That was in Philadelphia, right? Wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, in March or April of Philadelphia. I remember it because it was the day of the NCAA championship game when Isaiah Thomas was playing for Indiana. I remember that.
And he had some good shots that game too.
That was 1980, right? So Reagan had just
Tim
become
was a
president.
wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And
I mean, when you go back to that, Jim, I mean, we're lucky that Reagan survived that, right? I mean,
Yes.
Thank God
it
the
was
Secret Service agents were there.
Yeah.
it was much more serious than you would have imagined. Actually, the funny story of that though is the day after Reagan was shot. Tim McCarthy, of course, was in the hospital with him. They were just one floor apart, and the president wanted to see Tim, and Tim went in to see Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan said to Tim, he said, I just have one question for you. He said, what did that guy have against the Irish?
That's pretty funny.
You need some light moments at that time, don't you?
Yeah. I imagine Tim wrote a book also. Did he write a book?
No, Tim wouldn't.
Secret
Tim
Service,
wouldn't do that.
the honor code.
That's the bad thing about taking a job. You can't write a book.
Yeah, I imagine, I'm still blown away. I can't figure out, Jim, the Pelosi thing. I'm sorry, it's just on my mind. It's just why? Because the midterms are coming up. There's something that's so strange about this that they're not releasing any kind of audio, any kind of video on this, and it's blown me away. And there's a reason, and I think it's a nefarious reason.
The investigators and all of us would wonder, specifically about the timing of this whole thing.
Exactly.
But I try not to draw those kind of conclusions. I don't know the stories.
Yeah, and she wouldn't have Secret Service protection. So maybe she had the lower tier, whatever the congressional protection is that is supposed to watch their house. She wasn't there, so God. But how does an alarm not go off? This is hopefully a book is written about this.
The protection at their house, as I understand it, was provided by the Capitol Police.
It was, yes.
So not by the Secret Service.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's not what they do.
And also there's video of their house that goes all the way back to Washington, D.C. And for some reason,
Right.
they said they weren't watching it. That's just too. You can't believe that. It wasn't because she wasn't there. They really didn't pay attention to what's on the camera.
But think about it, Cato. This is San Francisco. A lot of nudists
Well, they're
probably
saying
roll
in
up
the
to that
news-
house.
yeah,
If the cameras weren't on, then you have to start thinking more about incompetency, and I'm not reaching any conclusion about that. But you just have to wonder why wouldn't the security be on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And why weren't they watching it? And so I don't know what their
Sure.
direction was.
Time will tell, hopefully. Hey, Jim, talk about your career as security for the Dodgers. What did that entail? Keeping
well-
Tommy Lasorda from the buffet table? What did you have to do?
No, we were responsible for all of the electronic security at the stadium. You know, all the camera work and that kind of thing. You know, and
So you were watching, like seeing if there's anything going on in the stands or in the parking lots or
and
wherever the
just-
cameras are turned?
and installing all of that equipment.
Wow, okay,
I mean,
cool.
and
Got it.
maintaining it all.
Jim,
So-
I want you to ask me real quickly. Ask me if I'm a Dodger fan.
You're from Wisconsin. You're probably not a Dodger fan. You're
No,
probably
no,
a Brewers fan.
I am, but
So-
I'm setting myself up for a joke. Just ask me that question.
Oh, okay. Are you a Dodgers fan?
Well, sorta.
Oh, that's sort of-
You know, the joke won't work on the show, but I put it in there anyways, Jim. Jim, I always go from the Secret Service to a corny joke.
Well, I have to relate the story that of course I was always a Bears fan. You know, having Jimbo Covert be from the Bears, and then a number of my friends, as you know, are with the Bears.
Let me explain something to people. That Jimbo Covert, there's an actual person that played for a Hall of Famer named Jim Covert. We're talking to Jim Covert, and I was at a golf event. I introduced them to each other, but they knew each other already, and I thought that was. And Jimbo just got into the Hall of Fame last year. I was wearing his coat. There's a Hall of Fame coat. Do some photos with it. I'll send this to you later, Tom. But also, you're great friends with Ron Rivera. And
Ron Rivera, and his, by the way, his mother just passed away this week.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So I hate to, talk about that, but sorry, guys.
That's all right.
You can hear my clock.
Oh, yeah.
But so the joke there, though, is that every time the Brewers or the Packers or anybody else loses to a Chicago team, Cato and I end up talking to each other, and I give him a hard time.
Oh, I don't pick up. Believe me, if the Packers lose and Jim calls me, I don't pick up the phone.
That's funny.
It's been a rough year
Right?
already.
Oh, my God.
He's called me after every loss.
Have they played yet? No.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
they
they
didn't play?
haven't.
No, you're
No, they
going to
haven't.
get 2 calls, Cato. I hate to break it to you. 2 calls. You're going to
No, I
get
think
them.
the Packers already beat the Bears. I think
Maybe they did.
I think they
Maybe they
played
did.
one time already.
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
you got another act in you? I know you got is it the restaurant now? Is that going to be,
Yes.
a hobby / passion / billion-dollar enterprise?
Well, the Lonely Dog Enterprise, I am a partial owner in, and it's advancing so quickly. I mean, we have Ivan, has 150, 160 pieces of artwork for the Lonely Dog, and now you have the show opening in Orlando. They're talking about the TV show, with Apple TV, and now we're doing the restaurant. So
Yeah.
I think you'll be hearing a lot about the Lonely Dog, project as time goes on.
Well,
But,
you're going to give us updates on that, Tom. I impressed, right?
Yeah, great. Jim, thanks so much, man. What a career. What stories? Elvis,
well,
Nixon, Reagan, White House, Dodgers.
We didn't even
Dan-
touch on this. Is just a portion, but I always said, always leave them wanting more.
Did we miss out on anything
Okay.
big here, Jim?
What's that?
Did we miss anything?
Oh, there's a lot more stories in there, that I could tell you over the time. But I'll tell you that one of the funniest events is Tim McCarthy and I were on WGN being interviewed one night, and they were allowing calls to come in from the public. And so, some guy calls on the phone and he says, well, both of you guys know that a Secret Service agent shot John Kennedy in the back of the head. And I turned to Tim McCarthy and I said, "Here, Tim, you're going to have to take this."
It's called, the
I
grassy,
have no comment.
the grassy knoll of the,
Yes.
which is Zapruder tape and all, and you can't even form an opinion of what you think of
No.
Still, how many films have been made? How many books have been written about the Kennedy assassination? And Jim, you're a part of that also.
Well, I worked at a time, on the reinvestigation of the assassination. So, I spent quite a bit of time on it at one point, but.
Huh.
And that-
Okay, let me ask you this:
that
if
anniversary's
you
coming up.
can't say anything, do you have an opinion, like a yes or no?
On what happened in the Kennedy
yeah,
assassination?
Yeah.
I honestly believe it's more simple than difficult, but I do believe that there is something to, the stories of the grassy knoll and so on. Even for what I know, I can't go into it, but, I think it's a simpler story than more difficult. So generally, I think they have it right. So.
Well, I'll tell you, Tom, on this show, we've covered probably just through Jim the biggest scandals in the history of the world, but of America. And Jim was part of, just from the Watergate to the Kennedy assassination to Elvis at the White House, and honestly,
Believe
Jim,
me, in total, I'm a pretty insignificant part. But,
Well, hey, it was great having you, Jim. Thank you.
thank
And maybe
you.
we'll see you when you come out to LA.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, well,
Best of luck.
That's
Picture that
fine.
show.
You worked. Cato's my advisor there. So.
I'm the advisor for Cato. Well, I'll contact you later, Jim. We're going to finish up the show, but I got to tell you, thanks for being on our show. Next time, we're going to get you either live in studio or a Zoom. I know you're in security and you don't like to show your face, but please wear a disguise.
Okay, I'll do that.
We love you, Jim.
That's what I do when I go to your house anyway.
By the way, Jim lives behind my house. I'm kidding. I got a guest house for him. I love you, Jim Covert, everybody. Thanks, Jim, for joining us.
Much appreciated.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Great stories.
Bye.
All right, so you've sat at a lot of dinner parties with him.
Yeah,
Does he hold court?
Well, you know what? My involvement with that's Jim calling security right now. I'll just take that right there. I'll call him later. Look at that. He's just checking up. When the Simpson trial was out there, he had his opinions of what went on. He wanted to meet, and we had met. And sure enough, I hit it off with this guy. And his stories, as you can tell, I could talk to Jim and stories and just pick his brain about, like you said, the Kennedy assassination and just so much from.
So he
Honey
sought
Walsh
you
again.
out because he just had a natural curiosity from watching the
Well,
trial?
yeah, I was in a meeting. That he was part of, and then we just were. Hey, he came up to me, and I was like, I didn't know him, but he knew me, and I was, so nice to meet you. Then he went on about the Bears and the Packers, and then you get to meet Bond because of our sport relationship of different cities, and now he lives in a few places, but he has in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. If anybody's ever been to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, it is it's. I'm obviously biased, come from Wisconsin, but it's God's country, the most beautiful, affluent area you can imagine. And that's where Hef had one of his first ever, most famous Playboy clubs, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I know it from the golf tournaments. Don't they have like the PGA tournament there or the U.S. Open?
Yeah, like I said, it's the most beautiful area, and the lake is gorgeous, and kind of taken after Geneva, Switzerland.
Okay. Well, hey, good show.
Incredible.
Jimbo Covert, part 2. That's so funny. He's from Chicago, and Jimbo Covert, who we both know, is from Chicago.
And I'll never forget that when I did the introduction, I was at a golf celebrity. And sure enough, Jimbo Covert was there with another gentleman that I know, Patrick Marino, one of the greatest people in the world. And that was the whole introduction. And then they hit it off and they knew each other. And
the rest is history.
It's history, Tom. And what incredible stories he has.
Yep, no kidding.
And like I said, he didn't even touch on that from Peter Jackson meeting every Hollywood elite of, he's making feature films. Jim's written books. He's recorded, worked with Elvis, and it's amazing.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Episode number 23. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you download, subscribe, do what we ask you to do, share it. Another great show coming up next week. How's your week looking, Cato?
Oh, Tom, my week? It's funny every time you do this, I appreciate you not calling me after the Packer games, having a tough time.
Oh, my God.
It
I've learned.
actually has ruined, once again, it's been awful.
Have you written off this season, or can you not do that yet? The
I
3 and
think
5.
if they lose to the Lions, I write it off.
They're not going to lose to the Lions. They'll
Yeah,
beat the Lions.
If they, we hope so. If they did, and this might be after the broadcast, you'll know if I don't show up. If they
God, I
lost.
feel your pain, Cato. I hope they can turn it around. Okay.
Well, the Bucks are undefeated. That's a good sign in the NBA.
Yeah, they are. Okay, they're rocking and rolling. Thanks so much, everybody. We will catch you next week right here, same time, same channel.
Subscribe, please, everybody, to 1 Degree Scandalous on YouTube. It's worth it to see us in person.
It sure is. For Cato Kalin, I'm Tom Zenner. We'll see you next week.